that might be a bit trickier, and we're more than prepared to take those. So I know quite a few have been coming through as per instructions to Tim. But if you hear of anything that I say and you want to sort of pick up on it, please shoot them through, and Tim is under instructions to pick a good range of those. Look, first of all, we have just completed, and the 2A should be going out this morning with the issue of the stock, the capital raise, 7 million at 6 cents. Lead managers with Taylor Collinson on that, and once again, overused phrase, but it's true in the book. We did receive great support from particularly our London and East Coast institutions in Australia. So we are very grateful for that. Obviously, we had slightly more tricky circumstances vis-a-vis having to withdraw the previous capital raise. I'll go briefly into that. I think it does require some addressing, clearly, and maybe you can hear it from me rather than see what could be written on a news release. We'll then talk about what's going to go on with Carlo Castle going forward, and then, as I said, we'll clearly get onto the Pattersons as well. But look, just getting on to Carlo Castle, taking that front on. Clearly, the company was extremely, I hate the word disappointed, because it was probably beyond that, in terms of the outcomes of the preliminary, not yet final published guidance we received on the Carlo Castle 2021 resource update. It flushed out a range of issues regarding previous mineral resource estimates, how they were calculated, what methodologies were used, and to be frank, what lessons should have been learned from that well in advance of us picking up that resource and seeking to move it forward. The news is by no means all bad, but certainly in terms of sort of managing expectation, having a clear understanding of where that resource was going to be given the work done, it was clearly way below what we expected. So just going through that, in essence, as many of you will know, we picked up effectively management of the company in January last year. There had been a resource published. It was the second resource published on Carlo Castle about 5 months before that happened. That was done by very reputable mineral resource consultants. We then, following on from really excellent exploration work, we then sought to do some infill drilling to start lifting some of that resource forward. Now, I'm not at liberty to go into huge specifics on this. There was a fair bit outlined in the preliminary results finding that we published to the market, and the final report is pending, and it's not too far away. So I do have to be a little bit careful in what I say. But essentially, the key aspects were outlined in that release, and they were that there was a belief that some results were skewed due to previous down dip drilling, and this is previous drilling before certainly I was ever involved in the company, and a range of other sort of subsidiary issues around the way the resource is calculated. Now, look, I take those at face value. I suppose where my incredulity and anger sort of lies, and I guess what it looked like we were sort of blindsided by that, is the simple fact that if there were these issues, they were long-standing pre-existing issues for years. And if they were not so much of concern, because it's not about concern, it's a mathematical calculation, it's about taking things into context, and the programs were designed to move that resource forward, the infill component, not the exploration component, but the infill component, were jointly designed. These issues were not flagged up, okay? They were not made clear to us that there was a danger that if we undertook X amount of work, that would trigger Y outcomes. And that's not really acceptable, and it's not acceptable across a whole range of levels. It's not just blaming external people, internal people to the company driving those situations and driving this program should have been alert to that. Okay, so I think that's where probably some of the speed of U-turning on the capital raise lay. We clearly had no on our gamut of management's gamut of outcomes. It wasn't even registering as a possibility. Okay. That being said, we've taken the appropriate actions as we see them, in terms of how we're going to manage the projects going forward and who we're going to be working with to do that. And we then now find ourselves in a position where we're going to keep moving the project forward on an exploration basis. And this is where it becomes, it's really important to get across that if Carlo Castle was a project that wasn't worth moving forward on any way, shape or form, I think our track record over the last 14 to 18 months has been very clear that we just don't spend money on those projects that we don't feel are going to add real short, medium and long-term value. And with Carlo Castle, that is just not the case. If we had wanted to reduce exit or emphasis on the project, we would have already done so and we would have been clear. The resource update or the preliminary guidance on that update and the final resource to be published soon, we believe is only indicative of a modelling situation that does not really account for the correct geological interpretation of Carlo Castle. So what I'm trying to say is the news is, in amongst all the weeds there, the news is still very good on Carlo Castle. It is a great project. I've said this to various people and various shareholders I've spoken to and press as well. You know, if we gave up on this project because we got it wrong and our other people got it wrong on this in one instance, we would be fools, because there are numerous mines, one particular that I've been involved in, the Nimri June mine, which has poured about 12 million ounces, that I can clearly remember the team that began drilling that out had it on a wrong orientation, a wrong interpretation, and then continued. And it's not about belligerently or blindly spending money where you shouldn't. It's about understanding where you've got things wrong, reinterpreting the geology, and attacking it from the correct methodology, taking that into account. And that is simply just a speed hump on the way of some deposits. But look, sure, I fully accept that at the end of the day, the buck stops with me on that. And we are angry and embarrassed, to be frank, that this first iteration of the infill drilling should have gone in the opposite direction. We should have spotted the hazard 6 months ago, at least, when we began this work, and we should have been aware of that hazard coming towards us. And we could have simply just changed the drilling angles, the methodology and the expectations, and we would have had a better outcome. I do also want to make it clear that it was my decision and the board's decision to withdraw the proposed capital raise then as well, okay? Because quite frankly, it was the right thing to do. So that being said, there are lots of complicated issues in amongst there, and I am somewhat limited in what I can say beyond that. But that, I think, is a fair summation of where we got to on that. I think probably more importantly for today is where do we go from here? And again, over and above that embarrassment and that disappointment, the news is still great on Carlo and clearly on the Pattersons. So just with Carlo, we are already completing our revised design program for the exploration of the Carlo Castle deposit. We will not be doing any more infill drilling for now until we fully understand the geological domaining of the mineralisation. It is a large mineralised system. It is a large discrete mineralised system that continues to be open in multiple directions. I'll give you an example from the preliminary data that was published in the update. You know, crosscut that we, on the exploration front of the work we've been doing for the last 12 months there, you know, for about a dozen holes, we logged more than 50,000 ounces in resource. Now that is good bang for buck in terms of discovery. So when we talk about the exploration angle of what we've been up to, crosscut, Carlo Deeps, extending the eastern side, looking for this new western shoot that logged 5 metres at 28 grams in our last drill release. That work will continue and should continue because it's you know, we quite simply still do not know where mineralisation starts and finishes. So what you should be looking out for is we'll be back drilling in a matter of weeks there, and we're going to continue with that, what I would call the more explorational, step out exploration angle of what we're doing. That will also attack a range of other targets within a kilometre radius of Carlo that we had already said we were going to attack, and that includes Little Fortune, Good Luck, and those other targets. And that is just simply growing the footprint in terms of sort of, and we'll also be following that footprint at depth at Carlo Deeps, because again, those targets were not part of the mineral resource at Carlo Deeps, for example, and we again still have drilled it to 600 metres below surface. We still don't know where that mineralisation finishes and in what directions it splays off in. So Carlo is very much a first order project and is still a large priority for the company. We will not be doing the infill components of what we had done vis-a-vis the budget for the year. So while we have raised, instead of 10 million, we've raised 7 million, incrementally, that's the money we're not going to be spending on the infill resource work. So keep an eye out for the exploration aspect of what we're doing to really kick off and accelerate going forward. In terms of the Patterson, probably good and timely always to talk about Patterson. Had quite a lot of inbound press yesterday that you'll be seeing on various newswires and magazines coming out over the next sort of week, next couple of weeks. Look, our Patterson program again is a very simple beast, and it's all coming to the crescendo that I think we're all waiting for in terms of getting those final heritage clearances, getting out on the ground and start drilling these things. Clearly, a lot of us will have read the Newcrest Havieron update yesterday, very much in line with my sorts of and our sorts of expectations. It's always interesting watching a deposit go from its initial resource and continue to grow through the next iterations. And any deposit that's putting sort of 200 metre intercepts at well over a gram and increasing copper content, and of course 85 metres at 11 grams, you're talking nearly 1,000 gram metres, is just going to keep laying on those ounces as it goes forward. Interestingly, just reading the Newcrest announcement in detail, they are still expanding the inferred resource, and they're looking to commence that sort of more what I would call a sort of regional exploration around the actual Havieron resource, which looks to be, we're guessing from satellite data, looks as though they're going to sort of be commencing that in the second half of this year. So basically starting now. So that's pretty exciting, because at the end of the day, as many of you will know, the sorts of structures and geophysical and geochemical anomalies that Havieron sits within and is part of a probably a broader footprint. Clearly, it's our interpretation, given they're only a couple of kilometres away, do plough into our ground, and that very much brings into play Apollo, Atlas, our two sort of, and Juno and Voyager, which we would describe as our best targets. And Juno and Voyager we did upgrade because they are both coincident with us with a structure that is very soon to be drilled by Rio Tinto, just to the west of us as well. So interestingly, what's going on out in the Patterson? A lot is the simple answer. I think there are a range of proponents all drilling in the sort of greater Havieron area over the next 6 months. It's basically the key drill season. It's starting sort of about now, or maybe a few weeks ago, and it will last up till Christmas. And those proponents, again, just looking at public announcements, you've got Antipa, you've got Rio, you've got Greatland Gold drilling up in the Jury JV, and you've got Greatland Gold drilling their own 100% tenements near us. Then you'll clearly have Artemis once we get those clearances, and the Newcrest Havieron JV drilling as well. So it's going to be a very unusually busy time for that part of the world, which is really exciting, because we're all learning. We all the proponents do talk in large part. There's a good relationship in largely amongst all of us, and it's really important that we all understand, because as more deposits are discovered, I think we sort of hark back to the last webinar I did, and we start talking about the notion of a gold camp, or a regional play up and down the various structures there. And I think that's the really exciting part of what's going on, not just for Artemis, because we believe we have great multiple potential on our ground, but also for other proponents out there, and really drive this area as a premier sort of destination for gold copper. I was asked by one of the Pay Dirt magazine yesterday, and whether or not the hyper the hyperbole was a little strong. You know, is it the best gold, copper, greenfields exploration sort of targets for Artemis and others out there in Australia or in the world? And my simple answer was, look, you know, that's a big call, but show me better. Show me better where a company, albeit Artemis or other, has an opportunity through a single drill hole to drive the levels of valuation, potential valuation, and appreciation on the back of a single or a handful of drill holes in a Western country, in a place with the sovereign profile of Western Australia. And I personally am yet to come up with something that competes with that. So in terms of what to look out for next, as again, in terms of our sort of subsidiary approvals, we've largely knocked a lot of those over. I think some of you may have heard me use the phrase, we had a whole lot of dominoes that we needed to knock over. We've largely knocked a lot of those over, and we're really pleased with where we've got to on that. Money is not an issue in terms of then expediting things from here. We're just simply in dialogue at the moment with the representatives of the traditional owners and the traditional owners to just come up with some dates to physically come out and check the ground for heritage clearance. And bearing in mind, we're simply drilling holes. You know, we're not mining. We're not seeking mining approvals or anything. This is just reasonably flat ground with some sand dunes. So it's simply a case of that, guys. There is, you know, for all the tea, I could have all the money in the bank in the world and it wouldn't make a spots of difference in terms of getting things done any quicker. We have the right team of people. We've just grown the team recently in terms of working on these issues. We are simply just waiting for available dates. It just is as simple as that, of when traditional owners are available to come out. We are coming very much, and hence I won't give you specific dates on when that could be, because that would be totally disingenuous. But we are very definitely coming to the sharp end of that. As soon as we have those heritage visits complete and the subsidiary heritage report in line, we will be coming back to you and telling you how quickly we're going to be out on the ground there. To give you an example, our targets at Apollo and don't really require any physical groundwork at all to access. They simply just require us to drive a rig over there, create a stump and a drill pad. So that's all coming to very much to a head. Clearly, we're fully funded to undertake all that work now, well in advance. So we're scoping 6,000 to 8,000 metres this year. This all just comes down to how quickly we can be out there and how quickly we can get the work done. And our basic plan remains unchanged. A couple of holes at Apollo, a couple of holes at Atlas, a hole or two at Juno and Voyager, and let's see where we get to with that and what that brings, because of course with every drill hole tells us what you're going to do next and where the next drill hole is going to be and how many you're going to drill. And again, those holes will probably be about 800 metres deep, and they will be relatively visual. If you recall previous drilling we looked at, we pretty much knew we were close but not quite close enough. That was our interpretation, and that was borne out in the results. Clearly, if we do get something straight down the pickle barrel, we will be very clear. We will understand that as we see the drill core. So that's the basic timetable. As I said, all these programs are now fully funded within our 2021 budget, and within Treasury we have well in excess of $10 million in the bank. In terms of other things to look out for, our money drilling with our JV partners Platina was completed, and those assays will be back soon. So we'll be updating the market on that. And again, in line with previous guidance, we are jointly together looking at options for that asset. We both share the view, Corey and I share the view that if assets aren't providing direct return, then we look for a home for them to create return for our investors, and we'll continue to do that. And the same goes for the Radio Hill plant. If we have lots of, well, we don't have lots, we have a number of people that are interested in using that plant or potentially doing something with it, and we just look at those on a very sort of very impartial basis in terms of looking at ways that we can derive some income or some output from those sorts of assets, because assets that are doing nothing are returning nothing. So that's basically where we are, guys. Tim, I think that pretty much covers it, and certainly within the sort of levels of, I'm not allowed to say any more about anything else because it hasn't been previously announced. That's pretty much where we are from sort of 10,000 feet. Do you want to maybe launch into some questions?
Yeah, we've got a couple which you've sort of touched on most of them,
Okay.
from, I suppose, a couple of longer suffering shareholders over the years.
Sure.
Is has so, which you have touched on, is Carlo Castle is that an absolute disaster, or is it just a simple misinterpretation on a big scale, that can one day turn around?
Yeah. Okay. Simple answer is no. It's not a disaster, and very definitely it's a matter of that reinterpretation. That's exactly the correct word in terms of geological domaining and understanding what you're drilling. If you, for example, and in very simplistic and not directly applicable, but in terms of just giving you the basic thematics, many of you know if you go drill a porphyry deposit and you treat it like a narrow underground vein type discovery or a discrete shear zone hosted deposit, you're going to come up with completely the wrong results. Okay, and very simply applying those basic principles exactly applicable to Carlo. Okay, it's about understanding what you are actually drilling. If shareholders want to have a look at the cross sections, you probably look at some of the cross sections and you see where we've extended mineralisation below existing drilling, and you scratch your head and you say, well, where has this gone? The short answer is it hasn't gone anywhere. Okay, it is being domained incorrectly, and therefore we are returning. It's not about having incorrect results. It's about having results that were previously miscalculated or mismanaged in terms of the inputs you get into any model. Okay, so the short answer is, if the news was bad on Carlo, I would be articulating it to you right now, and the simple answer is it is not, and that is not a face-saving exercise. That is just a geological fact. In terms of where we could go across the West Australian gold scene to start drilling something that has a potential to keep growing into a multi-million ounce deposit. Again, show me much better than Carlo Castle. But there's been a lot of focus on that particular resource area. It's still open in all directions. There are just not that many walk-up projects that can deliver that. And in terms of the tenor of the gold and copper grade, we know that once we interpret it properly and we derive a resource based on a correct interpretation, that has the potential to put those grades back where we think they should be. And again, copper tons actually went up, and I'm certainly not glossing over it, but copper tons actually went up, and it was the first time, because of the increased level of work done, that we were allowed to actually report gold equivalent, i.e. adding in the copper back into the gold calculation and giving you the equivalence. And while we weren't happy with the result, most of the tonnage on that was 1.7 gram equivalent. Now, we still think if we treat it properly and domain it properly in terms of the tons and the that we're chasing, that we could do better than that. That still puts it in a really good overall grade envelope. And I'm sure, looking around at what's available in the West Australian gold scene, over and above a few, that is still a very good place to start a deposit. Look, just in terms of long-suffering shareholders, Tim, look, I do get it, guys. I know there's lots of shareholders that have been in this company. I'm an investor in mining companies myself that I don't control. I appreciate things have happened in the past that people still question today. Look, I just have to draw a line under a lot of that. As a management team, myself and Mark, we bought in to turn this around. I appreciate, I sympathise, I empathise, but quite frankly, it wasn't work that we ever did, and we can't keep apologising for the things that other people have done. I suggest if you have questions on what happened back in 2017, that really has to be addressed by the directors and the corporate people that undertook that work, because quite frankly, it's nothing to do with us. While the company remains the same, the asset base remains the same. The company in and of itself is not a person. It doesn't have a continuous stream of consciousness. I think, judging by some of the emails I've got as well, I think people are just going to have to understand that time has moved on. Okay, and whether or not you like hearing that, I'm afraid that's just a fact. Okay. So next question, Tim.
Yeah. which we've seen a little bit of this, and even at higher prices, is that we see some directors buying more in market.
Yeah, sure. Well, as you know, I certainly bought a reasonable amount of stock on market, above today's price for sure. More than happy to buy stock on market. Anyone that knows me knows I do when I can, often in closed periods, clearly still in a closed period now. Would have participated in the recent capital raises, but unfortunately that would have held everything up because directors' participations in cap raises is subject to shareholder approval, which would have been an unnecessary waste of money seeking that approval. But yep, as and when I am not in closed periods, you may very well see me lodging increased shareholder notices. I can't. It'd be inappropriate for me to speak on the actions of other directors, but I'm sure some of them may do the same as well.
And you touched on it briefly, but the Radio Hill's been pretty quiet of
Yep.
late. Is there? You mentioned that there's things happening in the background. Is there anything more you can touch on with that?
Look, obviously, I'm not allowed to touch on specifics over and above what we've said to the market, but look, it just remains very, very simple. Okay, whatever previous proponents had said that Radio Hill is for, it does not sit within the plans as we see them, or necessarily sit within the plans as we see them. Okay. It's essentially a nickel plant that's had some work done on the front end of the gold and has an incomplete sulfide flotation circuit on the back end. Okay, and that is the reality. It does have real value, and it has real tangible value and book value, and it has real strategic value in the area. That I can confirm, and that's a fantastic thing to have, particularly for production licenses, the granted status, etc., etc. But as it stands today, a sort of retrofitted plant for sort of coarse gold and those sort of things just is not. I believe a lot of this work was done back when the previous sort of iterations of what people were proposing to do there. That doesn't necessarily sit within a commercial scale gold mine of the sort of things we're trying to develop, your million ounce plus gold mines. Okay, that all comes down to sizing, it comes down to location, it comes down to equipment. Okay, it really is that simple. Having a plant doesn't mean it's the right plant or the right size plant, or the right plant in the right place. Okay, that's just the reality of this industry. So what we see is a book value asset and a really strategic asset that can be leveraged off though. So I'm not trying to talk it down. I'm just trying to tell people what it is and what it isn't. So Tim, this asset remains on our balance sheet, and we've spoken to several parties about how they might be able to take it forward and create real value for us as owners of that, or partial owners, or potentially non-owners of that. It really just is a dispassionate process about looking at an asset and seeing how you can maximise real value for it. Okay. So that's our attitude, and that's our corporate stance with that, and that hasn't changed. So as soon as we do or don't have something concrete on any of those, of course we'll be talking to shareholders about how we're going to do that. But look, at the end of the day, looking at our balance sheet today and our market cap today, yeah, it's a great asset to have that appears to have no value on the balance sheet. Let's get some value for it. So yeah.
And now looking forward to the Patterson's drilling, how many meters, expected costs, expected timing, and also of those couple of targets that you mentioned, will you be hitting in this coming up program?
Yeah, look, I did touch on a bit of that, but I'll just surmise it so everyone's absolutely clear again. Look, again, we said our budget's basically 6,000 to 8,000 metres of diamond. That'll either be a single or two rigs. It really comes down to availability and those sort of things. And it doesn't really matter whether it's a single rig or it's multiple rigs. It's we have a window to work within before the end of December, and it just depends on what we hit with the first couple of holes, to be honest with you. In terms of budget, yeah, look, well within budget. I think we've given budget for 6,000 metres. We budgeted $3.5 million and an additional $1 million for if we get up to 8,000. I suspect we'll get somewhere in between that done this year. I don't think we'll get all of it done, but of course then we'll be heritage clear to come back and finish that sort of what I would call phase one, or that major phase program. But that all sits within our budget, Tim, and we're fully funded to do all that work, mate. We have the people we need to do it. We have the drillers are waiting for us to give them the nod. As I said, it's unusually busy out there this year, which is great because we're all going to leverage off that success. Because personally, it's my personal belief that we see, even if before we, if someone yells from the hills and made another discovery out there tomorrow, I really, really think that the overall understanding of what's really going on the Patterson I think the penny will even start to drop more, mate. Because at the end of the day, I do know a lot of people listening do follow the Pattersons very closely. I'm still surprised at how many people don't, and how they don't understand the nature and tenor of what's going on out there. As I sort of came back to the sort of perhaps overblown statements, I mean, show me a more valuable and interesting gold copper province in a tier one country. I would suspect, other than sort of to Canada, I just can't really put my finger on anything, mate, in terms of where big companies are going to go to get big deposits and leverage off massive infrastructure. Just to remind everyone, Telfer, I think basically the scoping for Javier as it sort of stands today might, and I say might, see it, in the sort of 7 to 8 million tonnes of feed into Telfer. Well, there's 22 million tonnes of milling capacity there. So, who's going to feed that mill? And how much copper is going to come out of it, given its enormous copper circuit as well. So I think there's a whole range of opportunities. And once again, unashamedly, I make no apologies for Artemis being the 100% owned junior proponent. We have not done joint ventures, not because we have not been offered joint ventures. Again, I just want to clear up a lot of misunderstanding. Our model, given the jurisdiction and the relative, it might sound tricky drilling these deep holes. It just isn't. I think people are starting to become much more accustomed to seeing deeper holes now. They're just not, we're not putting man on the moon. It's a risk reward ratio that is as good as I've ever seen. So it's not that we haven't been offered JVs. It's not that people didn't want to get involved in what we're doing. It's just given the success of Greatland and the value they've created, they're a $1.5 billion company. We see the leverage to success as extreme. So the fact that we're wedged in between Newcrest, Rio, various Antipa and Greatland JVs and Fortescue and IGO, well, that's just fine with us. Okay, that is very much our strategy. We don't do it arrogantly. It's not about saying how good we are. It's just the risk reward ratio is just so massively skewed that's what we're going to do. So that's the sort of, and again, Tim, just to answer the question again, in terms of timing, I hope people appreciate this is, again, most of the dominoes are all knocked over. We're just simply waiting for that booking time to get out there and do that heritage work, guys. If there was anything that could be done to expedite that further, it has already been done. It is just simply, and they are just the same. It's the same process. It's not an onerous process that every proponent goes through, Rio, Newcrest, Greatland, Antipa, all of us. It just takes time, and that's a fact. But we're getting very much to the sharp end of that, Tim. And, when we've got something absolutely concrete to say, we'll tell you. But the good news is, we'll be out there drilling for the entire rest of this year. So it's going to be terrific.
And the last one, which is on Javier and Artemis as well. So Canaccord had put out a note recently saying the preliminary resource, which I think was around a bit over 4 million ounces.
Yeah, combined.
They're sort of saying that it's easily 2 to 5 times that. In terms of Artemis's targets and or project as a whole, how far, as the crow flies, are we talking of these targets away from Javier?
Oh, sure. Look, again, and again, I was speaking to some journalists yesterday. You talk about neurology. Look, a couple of quick comments on that, and it's really nice to read Canaccord writing the sort of things that I know that both Newcrest and Greatland would like to say, but unfortunately, from a regulatory perspective, you're not. as I alluded to earlier, you know, when you come out with an initial resource, right? Some people think, well, is that it? You know, etc. Well, there's no gold mine in the world that drills its entire resource out before it starts mining, right? That's just not. That's not a correct deployment of capital in advance of what you're doing. Every resource grows and continues to grow for its entire life, and it continues to fluctuate because it's a mathematical computation based on all sorts of variables that go up and down over time. But the most interesting thing is the growth in footprint that I see at Javier on. I think we're pretty much on record. People know my views, certainly from investment company views when we invested in Greatland 3 years ago. You know, I think it had all the hallmarks of a 20 million ounce deposit. My views on that, thankfully, over the last 3 years, have not changed at all. Okay, if anything, they're growing greedier, and that's not blind optimism. That's looking at the tenor of mineralisation. That's looking at the size of the mineralised footprint, and it's also understanding what the mineralisation is in terms of, you know, understanding the size of your targets, what you're looking for, what you believe is the causative factors. What I believe might not be correct. You know, all geologists and you know have a different view, but the basic tenets are there in terms of regional structure, regional splays and plays up and down this you know what we see as a premier corridor running up through, you know, 20 kilometres of our ground, encompassing the Junos, the Voyagers, the Atlas, the Apollos, the Enterprises, and the etc. etc. In terms of neurology, again, people can scorn you for neurology, but I again make no apologies. You know, that old adage, the best place to look for a gold mine is next to another gold mine. Well, you know, the reason it's an adage is because it's true. Okay, because at the end of the day, when we say the best place, the word best doesn't mean you know the definitive truth before you start. What it means is where you best going to deploy your capital to try and discover another gold mine. And the fact that, you know, Apollo is right on the tenement boundary, and is the same, our interpreted continuation of the same structures, the same structural corridor. Well, you know, if you have a look at our Twitter page, someone asked me the same question on Twitter, and I just shot them a map that's Newcrest's map. It's not my map, and it just shows the footprint continuing up into, well, unless it magically terminates on the tenement boundary in a dead straight line, then I assume that there's a general assumption that that you know that kind of corridor does continue, you know, in our interpretations, and they are just interpretations, Tim. So the simple answer is, you know, Apollo, I mean, what is it? Is it a couple of Ks from where, or K or two, you know, from where Newcrest are drilling now? That doesn't mean that there's definitely something there because it's close, but, you know, it shows that there's a belief that corridor continues. So, you know, it's not, I always stress to people when they ask about how do you come up with your targets, you know, it's a varied approach. It's not just one thing. We don't just take geophysics, we do geochemistry. Over and above that, we really try to understand, you know, create structural models, because that's really important. So it's not about walking around with a treasure map, Tim, with X marks a spot, because as we all know, X never marks a spot. Okay. Now, there are elements of, in our belief and our team, geological team's belief, that demonstrate why Javier was a beautiful bullseye target. But in looking at the various mineralisation styles, the sort of high sulfide crescent, and then the lower sulfide breccia zones, you know, and this new eastern breccia target, you know, I think it's becoming highly plausible that the breccias maybe don't have so much of a geophysical target, and maybe that geophysical signature is really assigned to that unique crescent. So, you know, just because one deposit there looks like this doesn't mean the one a kilometre away has to look identical. It's just a nonsense. What we're looking for are the same causative features and functions that have gone on there to be present on our ground, and we very much believe that to be the case. And all of that counts for nothing until you go and drill it. And that's what we're going to do. But what we do recognise is, last bit of advertising, I'll say it again, the leverage to success, in my view, is utterly extreme in terms of success. Okay. And I simply draw your attention to what happened to the proponent next door when they had a similar measure of success. Now, the difference now is there's a decline under construction, and there's a 500-man camp, and there's 12 rigs drilling, or however many there are, Javier on. So instead of being in a lonely old part of the world, we now have a very large deposit development underway next to us. And that opens up a whole raft of options and availabilities to us in terms of what we do on success that, to be frank, weren't available to Greatland when they first drilled that amazing, that amazing 275 metres. It's nearly 5 grams a tonne 3 years ago. So, yep, hopefully that covers those sorts of questions, Tim.
Sorry, last one, rig availability for that program. DDH.
Look, rig availability is, look, it is an issue, and at risk of making a fool of myself until you really wave some meters in front of a driller, they're not really going to give you an answer, and nor should they, because they're trying to maximise their return. Look, I'm not going to say I'm not concerned. I'm not concerned about rig availability, because quite simply I believe that our program is of size and scope to be very attractive to your, whether it's DDH1, maybe they don't have a bit of kit, maybe it's someone else. It's not the point. It's good drilling. It's profitable drilling. And I certainly think maybe a real attractant to us is, obviously there's a huge drilling program going on next door to us with all the attached sort of workshops and scheduling of large numbers of people from a particular drill company. That's, in my experience, is pretty attractive for an operator to then put an extra drill rig on, because they've got a real centre of gravity right near you. But look, in terms of sort of our, and again, not trying to tempt fate, in terms of sort of what's going on in our head and our team's head of what things we want to get done before we get out there. It's not our sort of top priorities or what we're thinking about. Our major thing is to get the heritage clearance done first, to get that done. Once we get line of sight on those exact dates, that then allows us to make the phone calls to start booking the rigs. Okay, so that's how it's going to work. But at the moment, again, not tempting fate. It is busy out there. I know there's a lot of rig sharing going on. I'm pretty confident, Tim, that that's not going to be something that's going to foul us up. But again, in this industry, you just got to be prepared for everything, because it's a physical, it's a physical act, and we need to get that locked in as soon as possible.
Well, that pretty much wraps us up then. Thanks for that. I think we've covered everything.
Good. All right. Well, look. Thanks everyone for your continued support. Thanks to our existing shareholders, our new shareholders, and again, I hope we've been pretty frank about sort of good things and things that weren't as good, that didn't go our way. But again, we do appreciate it. Keep an eye out. The company's not been standing still and is not standing still across all fronts, including the Patterson. And no one's looking forward to putting out all these various news across Carlo, across Patterson's, more than us, and looking forward to getting out on the ground and hammering the Pattersons and seeing what's there. So look, thanks for your time, and thanks for everyone. And any further questions, I think you're more than welcome just to alistair.clayton@artemisresources.com.au. Shoot through questions. I'm sure we can answer them for you.
Okay, well, appreciate that, mate. Appreciate you getting up in the middle of the night as well. Go and get some sleep, and hopefully everyone can keep following Artemis and maybe add to their positions currently at these levels.
That's right.
Cheers, guys. Thanks a lot.